Q. Skills for Success. Reading and Writing. Level 4. Published and copyrighted by Oxford University Press, 2011. CD2. Unit 6. The Science of Food. The Q Classroom. Page 131.
In Unit 6, we're going to talk about the science of food. So let's start off with the Unit 6 question, should science influence what we eat? Una, what do you think?
Sure. If science teaches us that something is unhealthy, we shouldn't eat it.
Do you agree with that, Felix? Should science influence what we eat?
I don't know. It seems to me that scientists always change their minds about what is good for us. First, they say people should eat a lot of carbohydrates. Then, they change it to not so many carbohydrates. I think there are people all over the world eating different kinds of diets and staying healthy.
So your answer is no? We shouldn't let science influence what we eat?
Yeah, I guess I'm saying no. I think our common sense and our cultural traditions can tell us what's good for us better than science can.
That's true. You don't need a scientist to tell you that it's bad to eat fast food all the time. My grandmother could have told you that.
Sophie, what's your opinion on this? Should science influence what we eat?
Of course it should. Just because a food is traditional doesn't mean it's good for us. People live a lot longer now than they did in the past, so science must be doing something right. Also, science can tell us when something is really bad, like the toxins that are in some fish. Our grandmothers couldn't know about that.
Unit 6. Reading 1. Page 135.
Eating well. Less science, more common sense. Food is life. We eat it to grow, stay healthy, and have the energy to do everyday activities. The food we consume makes all of these things possible, but not all food is created equal. Studies have shown, for example, that children who eat a nutritious breakfast do better in school than those with a poor diet. The well-fed child is able to pay attention longer, remember more, and participate more actively in class. Research has also shown that adults who have a healthy diet perform better on the job and miss fewer days of work. The findings, then, are clear. Because our food choices affect our health and behavior, we must do more than just eat. We must eat well. For many people today, though, making healthy food choices is not easy. We're surrounded by information telling us what's good for us and what isn't, but usually this information is more confusing than helpful. In fact, different research about the same food often produces contradictory results. Take one example: food studies done on eggs. For years, research showed a link between eating eggs and high cholesterol. To prevent dangerous diseases like cancer or heart disease, people were encouraged to limit or completely eliminate eggs from their diets. However, recent studies now say that eggs are actually good for you and that most people can and even should eat one a day. It's hard to know who to believe. Shopping for food can also be challenging. During a visit to a supermarket, we often need to make many different choices. Should you buy this cereal or that one? Regular or fat-free milk? Tofu or chicken? It's hard to know which to choose, especially when two items are very similar. Many shoppers read product labels to help them decide. Not surprisingly, people are more likely to buy items with the words "doctor recommended," "low fat," or "all natural" on them. But are these foods really better for you? Probably not. Indeed, many food labels are often misleading. For instance, because doctors sometimes recommend that people eat yogurt for their digestion, a yogurt maker might then use the label "doctor recommended" so that you buy their product. In reality, though, their specific yogurt isn't preferred by doctors, but shoppers may think it is because of the food label. So how do we make healthy choices? Michael Pollan is a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, who has written many books about eating well, including the bestseller In Defense of Food. In his opinion, our food needs to be defended against needless complications from nutrition science and from the food industry. According to Pollan, we need to stop reading labels and listening to the so-called scientific experts. Instead, he offers some simple yet practical tips for eating well and staying healthy. Tip 1. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. In other words, says Pollan, only eat real food or things your great-grandparents would recognize as food. Make fruit and vegetables your main source of food and limit your meat intake. And when you eat, says Pollan, do so in moderation. He quotes the Okinawan people of Japan who have an expression, hara hachi bu, eat until you are 80% full. Tip 2. Get out of the supermarket whenever possible. Shopping for meat or dairy products at the market is probably okay, but a supermarket is also full of items like instant noodles, diet sodas, and similar products, the ones that aren't good for us. Instead, try to shop at a farmer's market or a local store when you can. The food there is fresher and healthier. Tip 3. Pollan says that eating is not only about physical health and nutrition. Food is also about pleasure, about community and family. In other words, choosing the right food to eat is only the first step. Learning how to cook and sharing a meal with others are also important parts of eating well and being healthy. Thinking like Michael Pollan's is challenging the scientific approach to eating. It's also helping people to reconnect with food traditions. In cities around the world, for example, urban gardens, common since ancient times, are becoming popular again. On small pieces of land, neighbors are working together to grow fruit and vegetables. What are the benefits of these gardens? Better nutrition, for one thing. People have access to more fresh fruit and vegetables, especially poorer people who are less likely to spend money on these items. The food also costs less than it would in a supermarket, where it was probably driven in from farms or shipped in from another country. There are other benefits, too. Working together in the garden helps people to exercise. It also promotes community and sharing. Urban gardens have also been used to teach children about food production and healthy eating. At the Edible Schoolyard, a program at a public school in the U.S., children learn how to plant and harvest fruit and vegetables. They also learn how to clean and prepare them for meals, a skill that they will be able to use all their lives. And best of all, because the children want to eat the things they have grown, they learn to develop healthy eating habits. Ultimately, making healthy food choices and eating well do not have to be difficult. Doing simple things, changing your shopping habits, learning to cook, planting a garden, and limiting your intake of certain foods can result in a better diet and a healthier you. Bon appétit!
Unit 6. Reading 2, page 142.
Anatomy of a nutrition trend. Have you ever wondered how nutrition trends get started? Why did fat-free become all the rage in the 1990s? Why is low-carb currently the in thing? Consumers complain that health advisors keep changing their minds. On the other hand, consumers also change their priorities when it comes to the nutrition topics they are interested in. Are trends really that hard to understand? Trend starters. Felicia Bush, a nutrition consultant, believes that there are really two different kinds of trends. The first kind develops from a groundswell of interest. It can come from a new book or a study that presents a new theory. Scientific research often contributes to new nutrition trends. These kinds of trends are usually promoted by the media and continue until the public loses interest. The second kind of trend occurs when a major milestone happens, when there's a food recall or people die from a food-related disease. People stop and think. A milestone can either start a trend or support other trends that are already out there. Trends that arise from groundswells are more common than those that arise from major milestones. Trend influencers. Consumers' desires and needs depend on their beliefs and attitudes. Here are just a few of the many factors that affect public opinion. Beliefs about what keeps us healthy and how we get sick. Attitudes about our ability to control our health and eating habits. Reactions to hearing or reading news stories and reading books. Talking with friends and family members about the latest nutrition trend. Consumer surveys have shown that the public depends on the media for most of their information about health and nutrition. Of course, people ask their healthcare providers for information as well. According to the Shopping for Health survey from the Food Marketing Institute, FMI, most people rely primarily on magazines, 75%, and books, 72%. After that, they turn to healthcare professionals, 63%, friends or family, 58%, newspapers, 51%, and television, 49%. 25% turn to nutritionists. Linda Gilbert, president of Health Focus International in Atlanta, Georgia, is a market researcher who specializes in health and nutrition trends. Gilbert believes that the media have a powerful influence on trends, but that there is another crucial factor: repetition. Hearing the same things from a number of sources is key. It's not just the media that affect trends. Sources like friends and families, nurses, and even coffee shop conversation remind consumers that I've heard that before. When it comes to beliefs about nutrition and health, repetition is so important. You have to be exposed to ideas for a while before the message sinks in. Felicia Bush agrees that the media influence what people hear and read about nutrition and health. People get their information from the media, and the media often depend on a few top sources. Reporters tend to feed off each other. A newspaper article can lead to a TV story or magazine article, and vice versa. The Food Marketing Institute, FMI, in Washington, D.C., has studied consumer attitudes about nutrition and health for the last 20 years. FMI's survey data shows that the percentage of consumers reporting that they are very concerned about the nutritional content of what they eat was relatively stable from the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s. Since then, this percentage has fallen a bit. Some trend watchers think the drop in concern about nutrition is partly due to public opinion about health advisors. Felicia Bush explains, during the period from 1980 until 1995, we had to keep modifying our positions about fats as we learned more about the relationship between dietary fat and health. First, we had people follow no-cholesterol diets, then it was low-fat diets. After that, it became low-saturated fats. Now we're talking about low-trans fat diets. I think this changing advice has had an impact on people just giving up. In defense of nutritionists, Bush adds, there was so much information coming out at once. No wonder the public was confused. It's hard to have people understand that science is an ongoing process. Where do we go from here? Trends in nutrition come and go. Some trends become cultural norms because everyone is doing it. Others die because different needs and interests eclipse them. According to data from a Health Focus International survey, consumers are now very interested in the health benefits that certain foods may provide. The media's interest in nutrition has also shifted more toward the subject of functional foods, meaning foods that claim to have specific health benefits. The International Food Information Council, IFIC, recently conducted media analysis that offered some interesting results. News stories about vitamin and mineral intake, antioxidants, and specific functional foods accounted for 12% of all media discussions about diet, nutrition, and food safety. The other topics reported on most often were biotechnology, 12%, disease prevention, 9%, and foodborne illness, 8%. Also, news stories about fat have shifted from a focus on low-fat foods to how certain types of fat, such as omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, can have health benefits. Certainly, nutrition is still a hot topic among consumers, even though they may be less concerned now than they were in the 1990s. Nutrition trends, like all trends, change with time. They depend on consumer needs and interests, scientific reports, media coverage of issues, and sometimes major events. For most of us, watching trends is easier than predicting them. Studying them can be a fascinating way to look at our society and culture.
Unit 7. Work and Education. The Q Classroom. Page 157.
Today we're going to talk about the Unit 7 question, Does school prepare you for work? Marcus, what do you think?
Well, it prepares you for working as a teacher.
Not for other jobs?
Not really. I mean, in most jobs, you don't have to write essays and do algebra. I don't think most school subjects are really that useful for most jobs.
Well, you don't have to write essays at most jobs, but you do have to communicate well, and writing essays helps you with that. And you may not have to do algebra, but you do have to think, and algebra helps you with that.
I suppose, but working is so different from going to school.
What do you think, Felix? Does school prepare you for work?
Sure. Maybe not completely, but students learn a lot of things in school besides the subjects they study. We learn responsibility, we learn how to express ourselves, we learn how to work with others. All of those things are important in any career.
Una, what's your opinion? Does school prepare you for work?
In some ways, but working is very different from going to school.
Can you give me an example?
School is more individual. We often study and write papers on our own. At work, you are usually part of a group, and everybody is doing a different thing.
Unit 7. Reading 1. Page 160.
From Student to Employee. A Difficult Transition. By Mina Alonso. It is a chilly January morning on the campus of San Jose State University, and the start of a new term. 22-year-old Ryan Adams is walking with some friends to their first class. Ryan is beginning his final semester as a college student. At the end of May, he will graduate with a degree in finance. Even though graduation is a few months away, Ryan is already working on a resume and plans to start applying for jobs in April. He is both excited and a little nervous about making the transition from student to full-time employee. "I'm hoping to have a job by the summer," he explains. "You know, it'll be good to finally get out into the working world. On the other hand, it'll be the first real job I've ever had, and that's a little scary." By the time Ryan graduates, he will have spent 4 years in college and a total of 16 years of his life in school. Like many students, Ryan believes that the time and money spent on his education will pay off. He will eventually be able to get a good job and do well in the field he has chosen. And yet, in spite of all of the years spent in school preparing to enter the workplace, many recent graduates say that they struggle with the transition from classroom to career world and have difficulty adjusting to life on the job. Writer and editor Joseph Lewis, who blogs for the website workawesome.com, suggests one reason why this is the case. Lewis believes that most of our school experiences from childhood through university are fairly predictable, while life in the working world is far more ambiguous. In school, for example, the pattern stays more or less the same from year to year. All students have to take a fixed number of classes each year, and in those classes they have to do certain things to succeed: study assigned material, do homework, and take and pass tests. In the workplace, however, constant change is the norm, and one has to adapt quickly. A project you are working on this month might suddenly change next month or next week, and it's often hard to anticipate what you'll be doing 6 to 12 months from now. Life in the workplace can be uncertain in other ways as well. Lewis notes that in school, for example, you advance each year to the next grade, and that change carries with it a sense of progress. a sense of growth and importance. In the workplace, however, you have no idea when you might be promoted. It depends on the economy, on your co-workers, on your boss or clients, or 100 other things you can't control. Another problem that graduates entering the workforce encounter is that they are unprepared to think analytically. In school, many students, including those in college, spend a lot of time memorizing facts and repeating what they learned on tests. But in the workplace, notes the Career Services Network at Michigan State University, employees are often expected to think critically and make decisions about their work, not just follow a supervisor's instructions. An employee who is facing a problem at work, for example, needs to be able to identify different solutions, select the best course of action, and explain his choice to others. Less time needs to be spent in school on testing, says one recent report, and more on helping students to analyze and interpret information, solve problems, and communicate their ideas effectively, skills that will prepare them to succeed in today's workplace. Finally, many recent graduates say that one of the biggest difficulties they face is adjusting to teamwork on the job. In some ways, school does prepare one for the collaborative nature of the workplace. Learners sit in classes every day with many other students. They must listen to others' opinions, participate at times in group discussions, and learn how to get along outside the classroom. Nevertheless, in school, a student normally works independently to complete most tasks, tests, homework, and projects, and receives a grade according to how well he or she has done. In the workplace, however, employees must regularly interact with others and are often dependent on their coworkers for their success. In other words, if an employee has to work with others to complete a given project, that employee's success not only depends on his hard work and expertise, but also on how well his colleagues perform. Knowing how to participate effectively in teamwork and deal with problems when they arise is extremely important, and yet it is also something many students don't get enough practice with in a school setting. How can we better prepare young adults for the workplace? Recent graduates, looking back on their educational experience, have some advice. Many think that all students should be required to do an internship while they are in school. Volunteering part-time at a company, hospital, or government organization, for example, can help one gain experience and learn skills needed to succeed in the real world. Other graduates believe that teachers should include more teamwork as part of class activities. Such tasks would familiarize students with the demands of collaborating with colleagues in the workplace. Still others feel there should be more focus on developing writing and public speaking skills, abilities many employees must regularly use on the job. Pairing this kind of practical work experience with classroom instruction, say the graduates, will help prepare students for the realities of the workplace and make the transition from school to career world less stressful.
Unit 7. Reading 2, page 167.
Making my first post-college career decision. Going corporate. As college graduation approaches and I prepare to enter the working world, I've had a hard time deciding what I should do with my life. On the one hand, I wonder, am I an entrepreneur? The sort of innovative person who could start and grow my own business? Then at other times, I think, would it be better to accept a position in a large corporation and climb the ranks? As I get ready to make the transition from student to full-time employee, I find myself thinking about these questions quite often. The good news is, I think I finally got some answers. From internship to full-time job. I've always been interested in accounting and technology, and for the past year, I've been interning at a large telecommunications company. It's been a great way for me to get some work experience and to see if this particular field is right for me. My internship has shown me that telecommunications isn't really the kind of work that I want to do long term. Nevertheless, I've learned a lot about communicating, collaborating, and dealing with office politics in the workplace. I know that I'll be able to use these skills in whatever job I do. When I began my final year in college last fall, I started perusing the job postings, looking for a full-time, paying position in accounting. At the time, I noticed job ads for all of the public accounting firms, and though I thought they were interesting, I ignored them. I assumed they were for the December graduates. Was I ever mistaken? It turns out that they were postings for regular May graduates like me. When I realized my error, I quickly put together a resume and contacted professors for recommendations. I eventually interviewed with several companies, and within a week, I'd gotten a job. I felt relieved. I had taken care of my future. It was November, and I wouldn't even be starting until the following July. Learning is key. Though I interviewed with different companies, I decided to accept a position with a large accounting firm, primarily because I'd already interned in the corporate world and wanted to gain more experience working for a large institution. Also, compared with the telecommunications company I'd been at, accounting firms' employees tend to work fewer hours for more pay. Why did I feel the need to get a job so quickly? Maybe I was anxious about earning an income and supporting myself after graduation, but I prefer to think I accepted the position because of what I could learn. At this point in my life, I believe that working for a large accounting firm will enable me to meet different people and utilize the skills I've acquired in school and during my internship. I also think it will provide me with the experience I need to grow in this field. However, once the job becomes predictable, once I stop learning and being challenged, then there won't be any incentive for me to continue with this company. At that point, I'll have to make some decisions about what I want to do next. Creating opportunities. Ultimately, I see myself doing one of two things in life: becoming an executive somewhere or starting something successful on my own. Do I have lofty goals? Sure I do. Do I know how, when, or where I will achieve them? Not at all. For this reason, I'd rather start out at a big company and see where it leads me. Eventually, I will either develop something on my own or continue to learn and do well as an employee. In any case, I know that I'll be given many new opportunities in my job with the accounting firm, and I'll do my best to take advantage of those. With all that said, I'm only 20 years old. I have time to make decisions. At this point, I'm reluctant to make a permanent career choice, and in reality, I may never make such a choice. In the end, I might become a corporate executive somewhere and start my own company. Whatever happens, I'm sure I'll do fine. Anyway, it's impossible to predict the future, and so for now, I just want to see how it goes with my first job out of
Unit
college.
8. Discovery. The Q Classroom. Page 183.
Here we are at Unit 8. The question is discovery always a good thing? We've talked about some recent discoveries, so with that in mind, what do you think, Una? Is discovery always a good thing?
No, some discoveries are harmful, like the atom bomb.
Sophie, do you agree?
Well, you can look at the atom bomb side of that discovery, or you can look at nuclear energy, which has brought affordable energy to a lot of people. So I think it's what you do with the discoveries that matters.
Nuclear energy has caused some problems too.
Yes, but it has also brought huge benefits. There's always going to be some negative effects, but that doesn't mean the discovery itself is bad. I don't think we should quit trying to discover things.
No, of course not. I agree with you that it's what we do with the results of our discoveries that matters the most.
What about you, Marcus? Is discovery always a good thing?
No, it's not always good. For example, I don't think we should spend huge amounts of money looking for new planets or exploring space when we have so many problems on this planet. I think we should focus more on preventing hunger and disease.
What about exploration of our own planet, of the deep ocean, for example?
It's interesting, but to me, it's a low priority. I think we should focus on the things that humankind needs the most.
Unit 8. Reading 1. Page 186.
A tribe is discovered. It's like a scene from an Indiana Jones movie, but this time it's for real. Photographed from a passing airplane, colorful figures can be seen in a clearing in the Amazonian rainforest. Two men with bows and arrows stand ready to fire at the overhead threat. They are painted bright orange with paint made from an Amazonian tree. Just feet behind them, a figure painted black also stares up into the sky. Beyond them, the entire village is coming to life. Other tribesmen emerge from traditional thatched longhouses and prepare to fight, while young children run for safety. As the small aircraft continues to circle above, images of the village are recorded, and the tribe's existence is confirmed to the outside world. The group lives in 6 huts in the Acre region of the Brazilian rainforest on the Brazil-Peru border and have had no known contact with the civilized world. The body language of the Acre tribe suggests that they have a way of life worth defending. From the images on the internet last week, all of them, adults and children alike, look fit and healthy. They have none of the material possessions of the developed world, but they appear to be content without them. We did the overflight to show their houses, to show they're there, to show they exist, said José Carlos dos Reis Morales, Jr., an uncontacted tribes expert who works for the Brazilian government's Indian Affairs Department. This is very important because there are some who doubt their existence. However, since the pictures have been published and because more people are now aware of the village's existence, a debate has begun about new risks and dangers to the tribe. How long will it be before wealthy adventurers and tourists go in search of a unique Amazonian experience? How long will it be before illegal loggers attempt to clear them off their land to cut down valuable lumber? Their discovery poses a moral dilemma for the authorities. Should the Acre tribe be left alone to continue their contented lifestyle for as long as they can? Or should contact be forced by well-intentioned scientists to prepare the uncontacted tribe for its inevitable first encounter with the 21st century? Dr. Nicole Bork, a Glasgow University anthropologist who has studied Amazonian cultures, says that views are divided even among experts. Some will say leave them untouched. Others, probably the majority, will say more contact is inevitable. So the best thing you can hope for is managed contact, where you send an appropriate person to prepare the tribe for what might happen. At least then, the first outsiders they meet are decent people. It's impossible to calculate how many tribes of uncontacted people survive in the world's jungles. The best guess of experts is that around 100 small groups remain, mostly in the Amazonian rainforest, an area the size of Western Europe. Other isolated groups are also believed to exist in remote areas of heavily forested islands, such as Papua New Guinea. How many of these tribes are genuinely unaware of the modern world is also unknown. What is certain, though, is that contact almost always ends in disaster. A decade ago, first contact was made with the Muranawa group that was living in an area in the Peruvian jungle. About 100 strong, they were surviving well until illegal loggers came in search of mahogany, a highly valued wood. David Hill, a researcher for Survival International, a global charity that campaigns for the rights of threatened indigenous peoples, has seen the consequences. They were forcibly contacted by illegal loggers who shoot to kill. Since then, 50% of them have died. Some were shot, but most died from diseases that were introduced to them. Simple viruses, such as the flu, which Westerners have natural defenses against, can prove fatal to tribes that have always lived in isolation. Last year, Hill traveled to Peru to interview the remaining members of the tribe. One survivor, Jorge, told him, "When the loggers made contact with us, we came out of the rainforest. That was when the disease began. Half of us died. My aunt died. My nephew died. Half of my people died." The group now lives in a more conventional village and has adopted Western-style clothing and a money-based economy. However, other Muranawa groups still exist and still live in traditional communities deep in the forest. They don't seem to want to be found. What has happened, says Hill, is they have moved even deeper into the forest. Hill is delighted that last week's image of the Akher tribe made global headlines. It puts pressure on governments to stop the logging, he said. I have no doubt that the aim of the flight was right. It was designed to discover where the uncontacted tribes are living, how many of them there are, and how they are living. If you don't know where they are, then you can't protect them as well. However, he firmly recommends leaving the Akher tribe on its own. We would warn strongly against further contact, Hill said, citing the proven threat of disease. One practical way of protecting the tribes is to limit the activities of the loggers. The Brazilian government has already closed down 28 illegal sawmills in Akher State. Another is to deter curious tourists. Most people are discouraged by the difficulty of reaching an area like this. However, in places like the highlands of West Papua, travelers can already pay $8,000 to be led into the jungles for first contact experiences. Dr. Bork is saddened by this. You get the curiosity factor, and you want your picture taken with a tribesman so you can tell your friends at home or post it on your blog. People don't think about the long-term impact on these communities. However, she believes that contact with friendly outsiders is preferable to conflict with possibly hostile commercial interests. She thinks the time may be close when uncontacted groups have to be gently brought into the modern age. It would be better if first contact came from the appropriate people with the right motives and the right medical support, who could prepare them for the future and what might happen.
Unit 8. Reading 2, page 193.
The Kipunji, International Team of Scientists discovers new monkey genus. May 11th, 2006. In January 2006, scientists from the Wildlife Conservation Society were in the forests of Tanzania searching for a gray, tree-dwelling monkey that had been identified in photographs as a new species the previous summer. Half a world away, in a laboratory at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Assistant Professor Link Olson and undergraduate biology major Kendall Hildebrandt were looking at DNA test results that pointed to an even more significant finding. The monkey wasn't just an example of a new species, it belonged to a new genus. A new genus in any living mammal group is notable, said Olson. Finding a new genus in the best-studied group of living mammals is a reminder of how much we have to learn about the planet's biodiversity. This was the first time in 83 years that scientists had identified a new genus of African monkey. A paper detailing the discovery was to be published in the journal Science on June 2, 2006. The monkey was named Rungwecebus kipunji for its home on Mount Rungwe in Tanzania. Scientists first described the kipunji in 2005 and noted that it differed in appearance and behavior from other known species of monkeys. They first classified it in a genus that includes 3 other species of monkeys. However, that classification was based only on field observations and photographs. In August 2005, a farmer found a monkey matching the description of the kipunji dead in a trap and handed it over to Tim Davenport of the Wildlife Conservation Society in Tanzania and Bill Stanley of the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. The monkey was sent to the Field Museum, which then sent muscle samples to Olson for genetic analysis. In the meantime, Stanley and Yale University's Eric Sargis began examining the animal's physical characteristics. Genetic evidence showed that the kipunji is related to baboons. However, both field observations and analysis of the animal's physical characteristics revealed multiple differences between the kipunji and baboons, which led to the creation of the new genus Rungwecebus. The authors of the paper agree that having a specimen of the animal to study allowed them to correctly classify it. Scientists who first described kipunji as a new species were unable to examine a specimen. A picture may paint 1,000 words, Olson said, But in the case of the Kipunji, those 1,000 words didn't tell the whole story. Olson said the discovery is an example of what can be accomplished through international collaboration among scientists. Newly discovered monkey is threatened with extinction. August 2nd, 2008. Just 3 years after it was discovered, a new species of monkey is threatened with extinction, according to the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, which recently published the first-ever census of the endangered animal. Known as the Kipunji, the population of the large forest-dwelling monkeys is just 1,117 individuals, according to the study released in July. The population estimate was the result of more than 2,800 hours of fieldwork by WCS scientists in the southern highlands and Udzungwa Mountains in Tanzania, where the Kipunji was discovered. The team found that the monkey's range is restricted to just 6.82 square miles, 17.69 square kilometers of forest in 2 isolated regions. The authors also discovered that much of the monkey's remaining habitat is severely degraded by illegal logging and land conversion. In addition, the monkey itself is the target of poachers. Because of these combined threats, the WCS believes that the Kipunji should be classified as critically endangered by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, which means it is threatened with extinction in the wild if immediate conservation action is not taken. We must do all we can to protect this extremely rare and little understood species while there is still time, said Dr. Tim Davenport, Tanzania Country Director for the Wildlife Conservation Society. Along with the IUCN classification, WCS is investing in the protection and restoration of the Kipunji's remaining habitat and conservation education of local people to help protect remaining populations. The Kipunji first made headlines in 2005 when a team of scientists led by WCS announced its discovery. Then in 2006, the monkey made news again when DNA analysis revealed that the species represented an entire new genus of monkey, the first since 1923.
Unit 9, Humans and Nature, the Q Classroom, page 207.
The Unit 9 question is, have humans lost their connection to nature? What do you think, Sophie?
I certainly have. There's no way I could survive in the wild. I wouldn't know how to find shelter or how to feed myself, and I'd be very unhappy without hot, running water.
I know what you mean. Felix, what do you think? Have humans lost their connection to nature?
In most ways, I think we have. Most people live in cities now. We don't pay attention to the cycles of nature very much, except to check the weather report. We get our food all prepackaged instead of hunting for it ourselves. We never see wild animals except in the zoo.
I have a pretty strong connection to nature, I think. I love to go to the mountains and go camping. I don't hunt, but I'm a pretty good fisherman.
Do you think it's important to have that connection to nature?
For me, it is. I feel much more at peace and relaxed when I'm out in nature, away from the stress and the noise and the lights of the city. I think it's really healthy. Also, I could survive fairly well if I had to. At least I could catch fish, anyway.
What's your opinion, Una? Have humans lost their connection to nature?
Maybe in general, but sometimes nature doesn't let us forget. Like when there's a big hurricane or earthquake. Then we remember that we don't really control nature.
Unit 9, Reading 1, page 210.
Survival School. On a brisk morning in October, Lee Posner, a powerfully built New York salesman, arrived at a remote spot in the northern Arizona mountains. He removed his glasses, unclipped his cell phone, and placed them in the glove box of his car. Then, with a deep sigh, he stepped into the cougar-infested wilderness with nothing more than a sharp knife. His face was apprehensive as he marched into the trees. "My survival will come down to this," he said, patting the knife at his waist. "The blade will decide." Mr. Posner was one of 3 people taking a 2-day course led by Tony Nestor of Ancient Pathways, an Arizona outdoor survival school that teaches survival using only primitive technology. Participants are allowed to take only a knife, the clothes they arrive in, and a tiny survival kit containing some cord, a fire sparker, and a water bottle. A tent, sleeping bag, GPS, camping mattress, and, more important, food are all forbidden. The main idea is to learn how to survive if a day hike goes wrong. Shaded under a worn, greasy hat, Mr. Nestor hiked a few steps behind the group. A calm, soft-spoken man, he has made it his life's work to understand how to survive in the wild with nothing. From the age of 17, he has wandered the country spending years with mountain men, Indians, and outdoor survivalists to learn his craft. He teaches a growing band of people intrigued with primitive technology. The number of people interested in this has exploded, Mr. Nestor said. A lot of people want to be less reliant nowadays. People want to know how to survive when the shelves at the grocery store are not filled with food and the government is not around to supply water. A significant number of his students are women. Learning to survive in the wild appeals to people on a number of different levels. Modern hiking inventions are great, Mr. Posner said, but high-tech rainwear is not going to find me water if I am stranded. I was a huge fan of Tarzan growing up, and I have always been fascinated with the idea of living in the wild with only a knife. Elliot Spaulding, 23, an undergraduate at Northern Arizona University, agreed. I'm more interested in how my ancestors used to live. I want to sleep in a shelter that I have made myself, in front of a fire that I have lit myself, using only sticks. The kind of course Mr. Spaulding and Mr. Posner were taking, this reporter was the 3rd student, does have very real dangers. Students have had serious accidents and even died while taking part in survival courses. After an hour of hiking up and down mountains and canyons at 7,000 feet, Mr. Nestor led the group to a clearing in the dense pine woods. Shelter is one of the first things you need to take care of, whether you are roasting in the desert or freezing in sub-zero degrees, he said, instructing his students on how to make a primitive shelter called a wickiup. We then littered the floor inside with pine needles. You have to have something between you and the ground, Mr. Nestor said. Otherwise, the ground will suck the 98.6 degrees of temperature right out of your body. The next essential activity was to hunt for water and food. So we hiked deep into a tree-lined canyon, where the rocks at the bottom held brown rainwater. The area was used as a water hole by local animals, and Mr. Nestor pointed out footprints. That type of print would indicate a cougar, he said. Mr. Posner filled his water bottle with a wary eye on the canyon's rocky sides. Wild onions stuck out of the wet ground around the water hole, and Mr. Nestor instructed the group to dig out the tiny onions using our knives. It took a good hour of hard work to collect even a cupful. We found a few wild cranberries and spent another hour collecting acorns. But soon hunger, a drop in temperature, and darkness descended on the group. By counting how many fists there were between the sun and the horizon, Mr. Nestor could tell how many hours of daylight were left. We have an hour to get back to camp to light a fire, he said. Back at camp, we used our knives to make fire-making tools from wood, and a blanket of darkness descended just as the fire we eventually started roared to life. Natural fire that I made myself, Mr. Spaulding said, grinning at his achievement. The group, ravenous with hunger, began the laborious process of shelling acorns, which were dropped into a rusty can we had found. Then we made an acorn and wild onion soup and devoured it eagerly, but we were all still hungry. Despite working for much of the day to collect onions and acorns, we still couldn't fill our bellies. We knew the night ahead was going to be long. The temperature dropped to 36 degrees, 2.2 degrees Celsius. The darkness enclosed us, and the icy cold stabbed into our clothing. We lay on our beds of prickly pine needles, putting more into our clothes for extra insulation. We fed the fire to stay warm. We either roasted in the shelter or froze when we fell asleep and the fire died. A gray dawn woke us early. Despite lack of sleep and the ravenous hunger from so little food for 24 hours, there was a sense of pride that we had survived the night. There are students, and advanced students, Mr. Nestor said, but no masters when it comes to outdoor survival. Our trip was only a taste, but it demonstrated the brutality of life without easily accessible food, heat, light, and all the other features of modern living that we take for granted. It's about a positive mental attitude and knowledge of the jungle, Mr. Posner said, just like Tarzan had. He tucked his knife securely into the waistband of his pants and hiked back to civilization. "Right," he said, safely back at his car. "Where's the McDonald's? I want a quarter-pounder with cheese."
Unit 9. Reading 1. Page 210.
Survival School. On a brisk morning in October, Lee Posner, a powerfully built New York salesman, arrived at a remote spot in the northern Arizona mountains. He removed his glasses, unclipped his cell phone, and placed them in the glove box of his car. Then, with a deep sigh, he stepped into the cougar-infested wilderness with nothing more than a sharp knife. His face was apprehensive as he marched into the trees. "My survival will come down to this," he said, patting the knife at his waist. "The blade will decide." Mr. Posner was one of 3 people taking a 2-day course led by Tony Nestor of Ancient Pathways, an Arizona outdoor survival school that teaches survival using only primitive technology. Participants are allowed to take only a knife, the clothes they arrive in, and a tiny survival kit containing some cord, a fire sparker, and a water bottle. A tent, sleeping bag, GPS, camping mattress, and, more important, food are all forbidden. The main idea is to learn how to survive if a day hike goes wrong. Shaded under a worn, greasy hat, Mr. Nestor hiked a few steps behind the group. A calm, soft-spoken man, he has made it his life's work to understand how to survive in the wild with nothing. From the age of 17, he has wandered the country spending years with mountain men, Indians, and outdoor survivalists to learn his craft. He teaches a growing band of people intrigued with primitive technology. The number of people interested in this has exploded, Mr. Nestor said. A lot of people want to be less reliant nowadays. People want to know how to survive when the shelves at the grocery store are not filled with food and the government is not around to supply water. A significant number of his students are women. Learning to survive in the wild appeals to people on a number of different levels. Modern hiking inventions are great, Mr. Posner said, but high-tech rainwear is not going to find me water if I am stranded. I was a huge fan of Tarzan growing up, and I have always been fascinated with the idea of living in the wild with only a knife. Elliot Spaulding, 23, an undergraduate at Northern Arizona University, agreed. "I'm more interested in how my ancestors used to live. I want to sleep in a shelter that I have made myself, in front of a fire that I have lit myself, using only sticks." The kind of course Mr. Spaulding and Mr. Posner were taking, this reporter was the 3rd student, does have very real dangers. Students have had serious accidents and even died while taking part in survival courses. After an hour of hiking up and down mountains and canyons at 7,000 feet, Mr. Nestor led the group to a clearing in the dense pine woods. Shelter is one of the first things you need to take care of, whether you are roasting in the desert or freezing in sub-zero degrees, he said, instructing his students on how to make a primitive shelter called a wickiup. We then littered the floor inside with pine needles. "You have to have something between you and the ground," Mr. Nestor said. Otherwise, the ground will suck the 98.6 degrees of temperature right out of your body. The next essential activity was to hunt for water and food. So we hiked deep into a tree-lined canyon, where the rocks at the bottom held brown rainwater. The area was used as a water hole by local animals, and Mr. Nestor pointed out footprints. "That type of print would indicate a cougar," he said. Mr. Posner filled his water bottle with a wary eye on the canyon's rocky sides. Wild onions stuck out of the wet ground around the water hole, and Mr. Nestor instructed the group to dig out the tiny onions using our knives. It took a good hour of hard work to collect even a cupful. We found a few wild cranberries and spent another hour collecting acorns. But soon hunger, a drop in temperature, and darkness descended on the group. By counting how many fists there were between the sun and the horizon, Mr. Nestor could tell how many hours of daylight were left. "We have an hour to get back to camp to light a fire," he said. Back at camp, we used our knives to make fire-making tools from wood, and a blanket of darkness descended just as the fire we eventually started roared to life. "Natural fire that I made myself," Mr. Spaulding said, grinning at his achievement. The group, ravenous with hunger, began the laborious process of shelling acorns, which were dropped into a rusty can we had found. Then we made an acorn and wild onion soup and devoured it eagerly, but we were all still hungry. Despite working for much of the day to collect onions and acorns, we still couldn't fill our bellies. We knew the night ahead was going to be long. The temperature dropped to 36 degrees, 2.2 degrees Celsius. The darkness enclosed us, and the icy cold stabbed into our clothing. We lay on our beds of prickly pine needles, putting more into our clothes for extra insulation. We fed the fire to stay warm. We either roasted in the shelter or froze when we fell asleep and the fire died. A gray dawn woke us early. Despite lack of sleep and the ravenous hunger from so little food for 24 hours, there was a sense of pride that we had survived the night. There are students, and advanced students, Mr. Nestor said, but no masters when it comes to outdoor survival. Our trip was only a taste, but it demonstrated the brutality of life without easily accessible food, heat, light, and all the other features of modern living that we take for granted. It's about a positive mental attitude and knowledge of the jungle, Mr. Posner said, just like Tarzan had. He tucked his knife securely into the waistband of his pants and hiked back to civilization. "Right," he said, safely back at his car. "Where's the McDonald's? I want a quarter-pounder with cheese."
Unit 9. Reading 2, page 217.
Man Against Nature. In New Jersey, man and nature are at war. This is not a new situation. Consider this. Humans took the territory through urbanization, but nature has sent in its troops in the form of skunks, squirrels, and bears to win it back by siege. Deer have occupied private lawns, golf courses, and playing fields. Bears have begun to search through trash cans in the western part of the state, while coyotes and geese have taken hold of the central and southern regions. And squirrels are invading the newcomers, otherwise known as humans, everywhere. With the cold weather setting in, more animals are beginning to seek shelter in their new natural habitats, houses. "We don't have ordinary wildlife anymore in this state," said Jack Neary, a local pest control expert. "What we've got is urban wildlife, forest animals that have been born and bred for more than one generation in an urban environment. Look around you. With urbanization, there's nowhere for wildlife to go anymore. There used to be specific seasons when people called about specific animal nuisances. Now it's a year-round problem, and boy, do people get crazy when an animal invades their home." All year round, Mr. Neary's Animal Control Service receives an average of 100 calls a day from residents with animals invading their home or yard. Mr. Neary told of one woman who called, screaming that she had a giant snake in her backyard. The way she was carrying on, you'd think an anaconda had escaped from the zoo. He laughed. It turned out to be a harmless black garden snake. One animal that is sticking to a seasonal pattern is the deer. September through end of November, the deer go mad, Mr. Neary said. It's very common for them to just leap through people's plate glass windows. I'm getting calls from town saying the deer are running down Main Street. In Oakhurst, John Tennant, a plumber, has taken to daily battles with geese that have taken over his neighborhood. Carrying a trash can lid as a combination shield, war drum, and rain hat, he runs at the invaders, beating a pipe on the lid and shouting. My neighbor has it easy. All he has to do is clap his hands and the geese leave, Mr. Tennant said. I have to go out there and beat the lid till they take off. The geese really drive people here crazy. In Medford Lakes, a community mostly made up of log homes, bats are the problem because they tend to enter through the gaps that develop between the logs. We get bat calls and the people are always screaming, said Diane Forster of the Medford Police Department. We send an officer out to the scene and he usually closes up the room and turns on a light to stun the animal. Then he either opens a window and hopes they go out or tries to get them into a pot with a lid. In northern New Jersey, a company called Metro Animal and Pest Control receives an average of 30 calls a day in each county, mainly for bats and squirrels. I think they all get hysterical, said Al Cervone, a partner at Metro Animal and Pest Control. People just don't know how to handle these kinds of situations, and they panic. A squirrel in the roof, a bat in the living room, and you've got panic like you wouldn't believe. Now's the big time for field mice and squirrels getting in from the cold, and the phones are ringing. What are ordinary residents to do when they come face to face with an invader? In most cases, the problem is a maintenance problem, said Mr. Neary. He recommends checking foundations and roofs and blocking up all holes and gaps where animals can get in. As a professional, he resorts to pyrotechnics, fireworks, or trained dogs to scare geese and deer from golf courses, playing fields, and large lawns. The name of Mother Nature's game is adapt or die, Mr. Neary said. It's a constant battle. You put a fake owl out to scare pigeons, and next thing you see is pigeons sitting on the owl. I've seen deer continue to feed right next to a noise machine that was meant to frighten them away. Think about it, he said. They're adapting. We're not. Tell me who's winning.
Unit 10. Child's Play. The Q Classroom. Page 231.
The Unit 10 question is, why is it important to play? What do you think, Marcus?
We need to play to relax. If we just work all of the time, we get stressed out and unhappy. Playing relieves the stress so we can focus better when it's time to work.
What do you think, Felix? Why is it important to play?
Well, what Marcus said is true. We all need stress relief. Also, playing can be a nice way of connecting with people. Playing games with others is a way of collaborating, a way of sharing and developing relationships. That's why companies sometimes have their employees play games together. It helps to create good relationships among them.
How about you, Sophie? What are some other reasons it's important to play?
I'd say that playing can help you get away from your problems in a very positive way. When you're playing, you're not just distracting yourself by watching TV, for example. You're using your mind or expressing your feelings or getting exercise, depending on what you're playing. All of those things are good for you.
Una, what's your opinion? Why is it important to play?
Well, A lot of the time, playing is creative. I think playing can make you a better thinker.
Okay, we've got stress relief, building relationships, expressing your feelings, getting exercise, being creative. Any other reasons why it's important to play?
Because it's fun.
Unit 10, Reading 1, page 234.
The promise of play. I've spent a career studying play, communicating the science of play to the public, and working with Fortune 500 companies on how to incorporate it into business. I've used play therapies to help people who are clinically depressed. I frequently talk with groups of parents who inevitably are concerned and conflicted about what constitutes healthy play for their kids. I have gathered and analyzed thousands of case studies that I call play histories. I have found that remembering what play is all about and making it part of our daily lives are probably the most important factors in being a fulfilled human being. The ability to play is not only critical to being happy, it also helps us to maintain social relationships and become creative, innovative people. If that seems to be a big claim, consider what the world would be like without play. It's not just an absence of games or sports. Life without play is a life without books, without movies, art, music, jokes, dramatic stories. Imagine a world with no daydreaming, no comedy, no irony. Such a world would be a pretty grim place to live. In a broad sense, play is what lifts people out of the mundane world. I sometimes compare play to oxygen. It's all around us, yet goes mostly unnoticed or unappreciated until it's missing. But what happens to play in our lives? Nearly every one of us starts out playing quite naturally. As children, we don't need instruction in how to play. We just find what we enjoy and do it. Whatever rules there are to play, we learn from our playmates. And from our play, we learn how the world works and how friends interact. By playing, we learn about the mystery and excitement that the world can hold in a treehouse, an old tire swing, or a box of crayons. At some point, as we get older, however, we're made to feel guilty about playing. We're told that it's unproductive, a waste of time, even sinful. The play that remains is, like league sports, mostly very organized, rigid, and competitive. We strive to always be productive, and if an activity doesn't teach us a skill, make us money, or get us on the boss's good side, then we feel we should not be doing it. Sometimes the sheer demands of daily living seem to rob us of the ability to play. The skeptics among the audiences that I talk to say, well, of course you'll be happy if you play all the time, but for those of us who aren't rich or retired or both, there's simply no time for play. Or they might say that if they truly gave in to the joy of free play, they would never get anything done. This is not the case. We don't need to play all the time to be fulfilled. The truth is that in most cases, play is a catalyst. The beneficial effects of getting just a little true play can spread through our lives, actually making us more productive and happier in everything we do.
Unit 10, Reading 2, page 240.
Child's play. It's not just for fun. Joshua, Alicia, and Scott, 5-year-old students in a kindergarten in New York, have decided to play store. At first, one might wonder if this is a good use of their time in school. What value is there in pretending to be in a store? As the game progresses, however, it becomes obvious that playing store is in fact a very complex activity. In order to play store, Joshua, Alicia, and Scott have to decide on their roles. Who will be the storekeeper, who will be the customer, and what role the third child will have. As they play, they must invent and act out scenes and respond to a changing narrative. When problems come up, the children must solve them in order to keep the game going. Through all this, their teacher occasionally steps in to assist them, but he never directs them or takes over their role-playing. While watching the game unfold, it becomes clear why many researchers say that pretend play is a critical part of a child's development. In its most basic form, pretend play happens when a young child imagines that one thing is something else. Say a stick is a sword, or a banana is a telephone. More complex pretend play, sometimes called complex imaginative play or dramatic play, involves specific roles and longer make-believe scenes. This is the type of play that Joshua, Alicia, and Scott were engaged in. Clearly, children are building both language skills and social skills while they are involved in complex pretend play. They learn to make compromises and take turns. E.g., this time you can be the customer, and next time I'll be the customer. They learn to listen carefully to others and cooperate, and they practice problem solving. But children participating in complex pretend play are also developing skills on a much more subtle level. In the field of early education, neuroscientist Adele Diamond and psychologist Deborah Leong have been instrumental in promoting the importance of pretend play. According to these two scientists, when children engage in pretend play, they are developing the ability to self-regulate. Children who can self-regulate are able to control their emotions and their behavior, and they can resist acting impulsively. These children have learned to focus their attention and concentrate on one thing. They can avoid being distracted, and they can make thoughtful choices and decisions. These skills will be vital for their academic success in later years. To demonstrate how pretend play nurtures self-regulation, researchers asked a group of 4-year-old children to stand still for as long as possible. Most of the children couldn't stand still for more than a minute. However, when the same children were pretending they were guards at a factory, they were able to stand still for more than 4 minutes. By pretend playing, these children increased the amount of time they could control their behavior. Pretend play may help young children learn to self-regulate for one interesting reason. During pretend play, children talk aloud to themselves in a special way. Rather than describing what they have done, they tell themselves what they are going to do and how they are going to do it. In other words, they are actively planning and controlling their actions and behavior. This self-regulating talk, sometimes called private speech, helps children direct their thinking. Private speech is very common in the pretend play of children. As play becomes more structured and less imaginative, however, children use less private speech. Unfortunately, much of the play that young children engage in today is not imaginative play, and consequently, it does not allow them to practice self-regulation. When children are playing organized sports, for example, they are being regulated by adults rather than by themselves. They have no chance to practice controlling their own behavior and impulses. Toys, television, and video games also inhibit imaginative play because they have predetermined scripts. They tell children what to do and how to do it. There is also much less time available for pretend play in kindergarten classes in the United States today. In one recent survey, 254 kindergarten teachers in New York and Los Angeles stated that children in their classes spent less than 30 minutes a day engaging in any kind of play. According to Deborah Leong, kids aren't developing the self-regulation skills that they used to. This is evident when one compares children's behavior in the past to behavior today. In an experiment conducted in 1940, researchers asked children ages 3, 5, and 7 to stand still. The 3-year-old children weren't able to stand still at all. The 5-year-old children were able to stand still for about 3 minutes, and the 7-year-old children were able to stand still for as long as the researchers wanted. When this same experiment was repeated recently, neither the 3-year-old children nor the 5-year-old children were able to stand still at all. The 7-year-old children were barely able to stand still for 3 minutes. For many educators, the inability of children today to control their behavior is a serious concern. If pretend play truly helps children build social and language skills and learn to self-regulate, then clearly this type of play should be an important part of a child's early education. Educators and parents who think that playing during school hours is a waste of time need to look more carefully at the research. They need to understand that without opportunities for pretend play, children will not develop important behavioral and thinking skills. Play, they would see, isn't just all for fun.